He appeared on the world stage once again on November 8, Putin, showing everyone exactly who he was. That night, Russia launched one of its most brutal attacks yet, on Ukraine. More than 450 drones and 45 missiles rained down on cities across the country. Power plants, apartment blocks, and even substations connected to nuclear reactors were deliberately struck. The message was clear: break Ukraine's will, freeze its civilians, force a surrender. But Ukraine had an answer waiting, as fires still burned in Kyiv, Kharkov and Dnipro. Ukrainian forces prepared one of the largest aerial retaliations of the war. What followed brought chaos and embarrassment to the Kremlin. Russian power plants went dark. Entire regions fell silent. Tens of thousands of Russian citizens suddenly found themselves without electricity, wondering why they were paying the price for a war Putin had chosen. For the first time, people far from the front lines were asking themselves, is this really the country where we want to raise our children? In the darkness, Russians began to feel a glimpse of what Ukrainians had endured for nearly 3 years. The blackout war had begun. The night of November 8 for Ukrainians. That night was terrifying. The missiles struck 25 locations, forcing emergency blackouts in major cities. But among the targets were not only conventional power plants. Russia had aimed at the substations feeding to nuclear facilities in western Ukraine. These plants were nowhere near the front lines. This was no misfire. It was a deliberate attempt to push Ukraine toward nuclear catastrophe and national collapse. But the attack did not break Ukraine. It awakened it. Minutes after the final explosions, Russian phones lit up with air raid alerts. Ukraine's retaliation had begun. Drones and missiles surged across the border and deep into Russian territory, even toward Moscow itself, as if to whisper directly to Putin, "You cannot strike us without consequence." Chaos in Russia. The hits came fast. The first major city to lose power was Voronezh. Residents recorded flashes in the night sky followed by the deep rumble of explosions. Ukraine had struck the city's main thermal power plant, plunging entire districts into darkness. The shaking windows, the wailing car alarms, the rumbling blasts. Russian civilians were terrified, confused, angry, and the strikes kept coming. Belgorod was next. Ukrainian missiles hit a power facility, leaving more than 20,000 people without electricity. While Russian telegram channels acknowledged the damage, local officials continued to claim that everything seen on video was just falling debris. Few believed them anymore. Another region Perm reported sudden, unexplained blackouts. Then Taganrog's power plant was struck so severely that it continued burning into the next morning. Videos showed plumes of smoke rising against the early light. Meanwhile, in Ukraine, the lights slowly came back on. 18 hours after the first strikes, apartment blocks flickered to life. Engineers worked through the night, supported by a secret network of US-designed backup batteries capable of powering hundreds of thousands of homes. Long enough to stabilize the grid. Ukraine had prepared for this winter. Russia, it seemed, had not. A darkening war. Yet even as Ukraine adapted, Russia escalated. Apartment buildings, ordinary homes full of families, became targets. In Dnipro, a high-rise was struck so brutally that residents on the upper floors were trapped among debris. Rescuers pulled survivors from the rubble, including 2 children, aged 2 and 13. Tragedies like this had grown painfully common. And inside Russia itself, even some voices on state television were beginning to question the morality of what their country was doing. One commentator compared Russia's treatment of Ukrainian children to the cruelty once shown by fascists to Soviet teenagers during World War II. His colleagues recoiled, shocked that he had drawn such a line. But the question lingered in the air. Are we becoming the very thing we once condemned? A story still unfolding: the war, the blackouts, the strikes, the fear it continues. The stories emerging are often too graphic for mainstream media to show, but they are real. Families trapped in rubble, cities plunged into darkness, civilians on both sides caught in the decisions of leaders far away from the explosions. And as Ukraine fights not only for its territory but for the basic right to live with light and heat, one truth has become clear. This conflict is no longer only about armies and borders. It is about people, their homes, their children, and the very question of who is right and who is cruel.